Welcome back to Priestess Initiations. Happy post-solstice, everyone. This is Casey, and today was going to be a different episode. We'll still do that one next week. That's Danu, Great Earth Mother, and I'm really excited about that. And on solstice and since and today, and actually, like at 2 a.m. of solstice, this is the first time this theme arrived, which in Colorado is basically when solstice was. It was a few minutes after solstice. I've been really thinking about the theme of extraction from the feminine. And when I say it first arrived on solstice, I mean it first arrived in perfect mental clarity. It's been a thing we've been circling around for a long time. Matt and I had held some Heal the Earth. Well, we had held a Heal the Earth / grief circle for a local climate organization about a month ago. And this theme arose then too about extraction from the earth as a big part of what we are grieving. Extraction from each other, extraction of people. And what's doing the extraction is our systems. They're systems of capitalism and patriarchy. And as a woman in a female body, it's men. There's this feeling that I've started to notice more clearly of bracing to be extracted from, bracing for my energy to be used and taken. And it's bracing around mundane things, the small asks. And I think a lot of women feel this and haven't framed it this way, right? They'll just say something like, I feel so frustrated whenever my husband asks me something because I feel like he doesn't see how much I'm doing, how much I'm thinking, and the executive function burden, right? And Gabby and I talked about that a tiny bit in the PMDD episode. But yeah, today I'm feeling into this theme of extraction more archetypally. And more archetypally, especially with Venus and Saturn. And so there's one transit that I want to talk about that's happening this week. I started feeling it early. I felt like I was feeling it on the solstice. And last week there was a moment with Venus and Saturn too. I'm trying to remember what day it was. I think it was it Wednesday? I'll look that up while I talk. But oh no, it was it was the Moon and Saturn that were in a trine last Thursday, which is part of it. But this week on Thursday, Venus in Leo is trine Saturn in Aries. And so trine is a beneficial aspect. It's a good thing. It's it's based on like a triangle. So if you actually we're going to pull up an astrology chart and look at it, it would look like, they're in one side of a triangle. They're both in fire signs too, which is interesting. And so there's this kind of passionate nature. This Saturn is usually, we view Saturn as restrictive, as the opposite of impulsive, but Saturn's in Aries, and Aries is impulsive. And so it's this really interesting push-pull dynamic happening for Saturn, which I think is asking Saturn to evolve, to be more balanced. And then Venus is in Leo, and Venus in Leo is shining brightly, right? She's owning her truth. She's at full illumination. And so it's this interesting aspect, and I don't know how other people are feeling it. But Saturn is my ruling planet because I'm a rising Capricorn. And so anyone who has a rising Capricorn, Saturn is your ruling planet. And Saturn is in my second house, which is money, boundaries. And that second house is in Pisces, which again, like Aries, is kind of an uncomfortable placement for Saturn. Saturn asks for boundaries. Pisces is boundaryless. And yeah, I think when we're talking about Saturn, we're talking about Cronus, who has an episode earlier on. And Cronus is time, father time in particular. And I think something we don't hear enough is that there's kind of two versions of Saturn. Just like there's two versions of Lilith. I've talked about like kind of an immature and a mature Lilith. There's kind of an immature and a mature Saturn. And I'm not sure if that's like the perfect wording that I'd like to use for it. But Saturn, as we typically think of him in astrology, is very much aligned with, honestly, like patriarchy and shadow masculinity. He's somewhat punishing. He's saying, do this, do that, keep working, keep grinding. And when you've earned it, you'll be rewarded. There's this idea of earning through the grind, which is very capitalist. And when I think about my relationship to Saturn, that's not the Saturn that I want to be in relationship to. That's not the form of masculinity that I want to be in relationship to. It feels extractive. It feels old. And I think the solstice and this Venus trine Saturn happening this week are trying to illuminate that maybe. And so I don't know where I'm going with this episode, but we're just talking about it. This episode's an Inkling. Inklings are very spur of the moment. I'm recording on my patio after just doing my own little journey with Saturn. And I've said a few prayers to Saturn in the past few weeks. I've been percolating on this, on who is the Saturn that I want to know. And the Saturn that I want to know is the Saturn that provides, is the Saturn that holds boundaries as care, that doesn't hold boundaries as restriction to trap, but as a container to create safety, as a Saturn that is providing safety. That is evolved Saturn, we could say. And that is true. And that's part of Cronus. Cronus's journey archetypally ends with him kind of evolving. He evolved past his shadow self, past his fears, and moved back into his divine archetype as ruler of time. And there's an underworld edge to that too in certain mythos. If you want all of Cronus's myth, you can go back to that episode. But I think that is what we are asking of men right now in society. It's what we're asking of our systems and institutions, to evolve past this idea of extracting from people, extracting from the earth. And I don't know about you, but if you've been talking to the earth at all lately, I feel like she's tired. I feel like she's done with it. And if you've been talking to women in your life, they're probably telling you the same thing. At least the women in my life are. It feels done. It feels old. And in my body, to be real, it's a mature Lilith. It's a boundary. It's I am done doing. I am done giving without reciprocity. I will be in reciprocal relationship to the masculine, or I will not be in relationship at all. And that's an ask. That's a line in the sand. It's a threshold I think we just crossed collectively. And now it's coming into awareness. But what does that mean? What does that actually mean in life? What does that mean in the nervous system? In the nervous system, it really means shedding these old patterns of boundarylessness, of overgiving, right? Of overgiving as safety, as over caretaking others. And the reason we tend to do that, our feminine selves tend to do that, is to manage everyone else's emotions, is to prevent anger in men, right? Lilith is the part that says, I don't care if you're angry. You can be angry. That's your problem, not mine. Your anger is your responsibility. And so what's happening in the sky right now, to me, is what's happening in the collective and is what's happening within self. And it feels really important because we also had this Chiron moving into Taurus thing happen last Friday, which I talked about a little bit in the Solstice episode. And that's Chiron is the wounded healer. So that's the wound coming into the body. Taurus is also Venus's home sign, so it's feminine energy, it's material wealth and abundance, it's roots and creating home. And so we're illuminating the wounds around that. And the truth is, Venus can't be at home. Venus can't yield. The feminine within us, within each of us, cannot feel safe while being actively extracted from. The feminine within us cannot feel safe while being in unreciprocal relationship. And so the work we're being asked to do, as always, it starts within the self. It's holding these boundaries for yourself of what is my value? What is my worth? What is the worth of my feminine gifts? And feminine gifts are creative. That includes any form of creative expression, any healing work, any tending, caretaking, child raising, gardening, anything that is undervalued in our society, teaching, is probably feminine gifts. And we're saying right now that has worth. It's also, interestingly, the one thing that AI is going to really struggle to replace. Because at the end of the day, AI doesn't create anything new. It only recycles what exists. The feminine is the part of us that creates something completely new. It's also the part of us that we often have the most wounds around, the most suppression of. It lives in the Jungian shadow. And the gifts within our Jungian shadow are called the golden shadow. And so as we excavate shadow material, we excavate golden shadow with it. That excavation occurs in safety. So in the therapy room, it's very interesting. We're actually, we say we're holding a container. What does that actually mean? That means to hold a container the way that the divine masculine should. That highest archetypal expression of Saturn should. And yet most therapists are women, which is interesting. And I think we've been asked to hold those containers for ourselves. And that's important, to be in balance within the self. But our world isn't reflecting that. Our world isn't holding safe containers. I'm done with that. And I'm sensing that we are done with that. And that's the boundary. That's Lilith. That's Lilith setting the boundary. And when I think of, like a archetypal feminine expression, I often think of the rose, which is interesting because roses are correlated with Mary Magdalene. But the rose has its thorns, right? Anything thorny as a plant is good for boundaries. In herbalism, roses are toning, and they are actually used for softness and boundaries energetically. And so the rose has these beautiful, soft petals. They're so delicate. If you tap them at the wrong time, they just fall right off. The rose, when pollinated, creates rose hips. It's the bud. And those are great medicine. They make a delicious jam. But roses are holding all aspects of the feminine. They hold this softness, this Venus energy. They hold the boundaries of the thorns. They hold the ovary, which turns into the rose hips. And yes, on plants, that is called an ovary. And they are asking to be tended with care. And they don't tolerate being extracted from. If you try to extract from them, they poke you. And I think we're being asked to move into something similar in our own feminine. It's trusting our thorns to hold the boundary while we can soften to receive. And what does that mean? What does it mean to soften to receive, to ask for more? I think when we hold boundaries, we are asking for more from the masculine, from our systems. I think of every great, political movement ever. There's a boundary. There's a picket line. There's, well, it's not exactly the same, but like Stonewall, right? Like these words come from people choosing to hold the boundary, to hold the line, to say no. And I don't normally get quite so political on this podcast. I do talk about systems and institutions a lot because I think that's really important, and I don't think it's ethical to talk about themes of manifesting or spirituality without recognizing our systems and institutions, because then we end up in the realm of spiritual bypassing. But our political systems reflect our culture. They reflect our systems and institutions, which are built on capitalism and patriarchy. And we are seeing the shadow masculine. We are seeing immature Saturn in the world everywhere right now. And we are also seeing women and people starting to hold the line. And I'm also going to name that I personally am actually seeing a lot of men decide, shit, they're holding the line. I need to do something different. And it's not just my partner. I'm seeing this among many men. And that doesn't mean that change is instant in the masculine, but there is an ask. There is an ask to grow into a higher form, into a higher, what we could call more divine masculine expression, a more mature Saturn that wishes to be giving, that wishes to be in reciprocity with the feminine. And there's another piece coming in here that I think is worth naming, and that's two wounds that every human I've ever met carries in some form, and those are I'm too much and I'm not enough. And archetypally, the wound of the feminine could be called I'm too much. That is very Venus in Leo. That is Venus shining at her brightest, which is, Thursday's Thursday's aspect. It's the trine. And Venus at her brightest is saying, I'm too much. I'm too much for you to hold yet. And that is not the same, I want to say, as her saying, I'm too much, so I should dim myself. She is not saying that. She's not saying, I'm too much, so I will dim myself. That's the wound. She is saying, I'm too much for you to hold, so grow to hold me. Different things. And the other side of that coin is the I'm not enough. And that wound has been really imposed upon everyone in our society, but traditionally, it's actually the wound of the masculine within. And that's probably why it's so socially prevalent right now, because we live under patriarchy. So we're really seeing that wound. That wound has really been projected onto all of us and taken into our unconscious. And that wound is I'm not enough. But again, it's not I'm not enough, so I should give up and be self-defeated and, be sad. It's I'm not enough yet. So I'm going to become enough. The light of that is motivation, right? And we all hold both of these wounds. I'm not enough and I'm too much. And we get to decide how we relate to them. Chiron, the wounded healer, his wound never heals. He learns to relate to it differently, to use it differently. And we're being asked to use these two wounds differently. To say, I'm too much, so I'm going to be too much. That's okay. Learn to hold me. And, oh shit, I'm not enough to hold that. So I'm going to learn to be enough to hold that. I'm going to take that as motivation to be enough to hold that. And when you have both of those within you, you're shining at your brightest, in your fullest, and you're moving forward, still growing. And when you have the shadow aspect, we end up in collapse, right? When we have the shadow aspect of those wounds. And so it's not get rid of the wound. It's not beat the wound into submission. It's changing your relationship to it. Yeah, and so I'm not sure how this episode got here today. But this is what is feeling alive for me in this moment. It's what I am feeling alive in the collective. And if this resonates, hit subscribe, leave a rating. I don't always ask for that every episode, but it really does help if you haven't yet to drop a rating or subscribe. It helps more people find this podcast and hear maybe something that they needed to hear in it. Because it's time for us to shine. It's time for us to shine, to receive, to change our relationship to ourselves, to the masculine, to the feminine, because that is how we change society. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for following my rambling today. And I wish you all a really happy solstice week. We know we're approaching July, and there's a lot of great Jupiter energy coming in July, which is going to be very cool in terms of receiving. And so I think right now this episode is feeling timely for that reason. And next week I want to talk about Earth and the Earth Mother and Danu in Celtic astrology. And so we'll talk about that, and I'm sure nervous system will come up for around it, some fairy magic. And I wish for you to open to receive, to find the safety to open to receive.